episode 157 of the CRICKETher Weekly.
Raf, is that a delicious mug of Tata Tea Gold?
It is. I'm drinking Tata Tea Gold.
Tata Tea Gold.
Not really.
No.
By
And
the
sadly
way.
we didn't get paid to say that.
No, we didn't. Anyway, as you might be able to tell, we have just watched Mumbai Indians win the...
It was a crazy game, wasn't it? It was
my goodness.
who actually did win that game, Raf? I'm confused now. No, the Mumbai Indians have won the Women's Premier League.
I got confused there because it was a bit of a seesaw game, and I was going to say that they were under pressure, and you know, at times it looked like they might be going to stuff up the run chase, and obviously there was a really important last wicket partnership, wasn't there, by the Delhi Capitals?
Yeah, I mean it definitely did go a bit back and forth, didn't it? I mean, at one point it looked like the Mumbai Indians were totally out of it, and you know, back and forth and back and forth. There were two periods in the game, one in each innings, where both teams flatlined for a period in their innings. Yeah. You know, for sort of 4 or 5 overs, and you know that kind of makes all kind of prediction just goes out the window at that point, and you know. But great game, and I feel a bit zonked after having watched it. To be honest, it was.
It was great.
Full of energy.
And obviously that kind of last wicket stand pounding yellow was good because it meant that it was an actual exciting nail biting final, right? So
yeah, it gave them something to bowl at, and you know they did bowl at it and took it down to the final over. You know. Whether it was entirely fair to wind up with Alice Capsey bowling the final over, that's an interesting question for me. I mean, she's not probably the person that you choose. I suppose that what they were really hoping was it wouldn't get to the final over. That's why they'd already bowled out Cap in particular. And then by the time you get to the 19th, you go, well, okay, we've got Johnson and Capsey left. Well, okay, it probably is the right call at that point to bowl Johnson in the penultimate over and then, you know, leave Capsey with a short straw. But I mean, you shouldn't really have a chance. But at that point, and then what final over was it?
Yes.
You know, at that point, they probably needed 4 wickets to win the game. I mean, it does happen. See this year's WNCL final, but not very often. And basically, you know, you're throwing the ball to Capsey, going, "Here's your hospital pass."
But great learning for her because that death bowler role is not what you would see her doing for England, for example.
Yeah,
so I'm guessing that John Lewis would have been watching on with interest.
Yeah, no, she's bowled a lot in this tournament, and you know, Meg Lanning's shown quite a bit of faith in her.
Yeah,
you know?
I think that's really interesting, actually. You know, I wonder what it's going to be like for her bowling at Meg Lanning in the Ashes this summer. That could be fun, couldn't it?
See what she's learned.
Have you got any overall kind of tournament takeaways, Sid?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, it has been a brilliant tournament. Yeah. Let's absolutely say that.
Absolutely.
I think that. A key thing for me now is like what happens now. How do they kind of build on this? How do they develop it? So there's been a big narrative among the commentators, you know, going, oh, you know, this is going to transform women's cricket in India. But what it really needs to do is kind of transform cricket for the players that are not at the very top of the tree. It's obviously changed the life of, you know, I mean, it's literally changed the life of people like Harmanpreet. She's earned more in the last, you know, 4 weeks than she's earned her entire career prior to that. You know, and that's a life-changing amount of money for her. It's a life-changing amount of money for a lot of players. But the really important thing is that if you want it to be life-changing for Indian women's cricket, what you have to do now is build on this. What's really important is all those domestic players that have played a part in this don't now just go back to their states and go back to, you know, playing, you know, the odd game at weekends and training twice a week, and you know, and it will be very easy to kind of slip into that situation where you go, well, we've paid you loads of money for this, now you can go back and now you're a professional cricketer. Because in India, the kind of money that even if you've gone like a £10,000 salary, that's enough to live on, easily enough to live on for a year in India. But you can't just go back to your state. You have to build kind of those structures around the other 48 weeks of the year. And that's exactly what the ECB discovered, you know, when they created the Kia Super League. So originally the Kia Super League, you know, it was like, well, this is going to transform everything. And then
I
5
remember
years
writing
later,
a piece at the end of the Kia Super League that actually said, oh, it's all about bridging the gap, and I did some interviews with some of the young players who were coming up through that tournament. I think maybe Katie George, people like that, and they were all saying it's been brilliant, much as there's been quite a few pieces around the end of this tournament with young Indian girls and people at various stages of the women's pathway saying, oh, it's brilliant, it's really exciting. But actually, that wasn't enough, which is what you were about to come on and say.
If you're going to kind of build that professional kind of infrastructure, that needs to be, you know, for 12 months a year, not for 1 month a year.
Yeah, and that's what we ultimately got in England 4 years after the KSL. Claire Connor was like, oh, actually, no, this isn't enough. We've got to have an actual professional domestic structure, which as far as we're aware, they're still quite far from having in India.
Yeah, so what they need to make sure is, well, first of all, we need to make sure, is there any money left? I mean, they've made a lot of money from this, but the money's gone into the BCCI's cost. The BCCI put on a fantastic show, no doubt about that. They've thrown a lot of the money at it.
Yeah.
They've thrown a lot of money at the players. Is there enough money now to take that money and invest it in the other 48 weeks a year for all of those domestic players, so that they can start to come up to those standards that we're seeing by the tournaments in England and Australia, where we've kind of professionalised that next level down, so that we've got a core of like 60, 70 professional players in each country, rather than still a core of 20 professional players that are the kind of the India squad, and then everyone else just going off back to their states for the next 48 weeks and doing exactly what they've done for the last 10, 15 years, which isn't going to make that leap for India. So that's going to be that's the key challenge which the BCCI have to take on now. They have to ensure that this is turned into a success, and it just doesn't become a Wimbledon where it's just one tournament a year. And yeah, you can finance it on one tournament a year, but you can't base your national team on people that only play top level cricket for 4 weeks a year.
Great, okay. Thank you for that, Sid. Now, closer to home, talking of franchise tournaments, we have had the 100 draft this week. And you were watching it live, Sid. I was watching a bit of it. What did you make of it?
It was a mess.
As a TV spectacle, first of all, we'll talk about the players in a minute. But yeah, what did you make of it as a TV spectacle?
As a TV spectacle, it was a mess. I mean, people like Charles Dagnall, he did his best. He was the person that was really thrown in it, because he wasn't given anyone to interview. He was just like told, well, you've got to talk in front of some silent video screens where people are sitting there, going, who shall we pick now?
Yeah.
And you couldn't hear any of the stuff that was being said about the teams. They didn't show you which players have been selected. They go, oh, a player's been selected. Oh, a player has been, referred for the matching
right to match.
Yeah. But they didn't tell you who the player was. And so Dagnall's left speculating who the player might have been. And he did his best, but it was just terrible TV. And it's just like, you feel they could have done so much better, right?
Yeah.
Game shows, in this case, it's a game show, right?
Yeah.
The draft process is a game show. Game shows are 2 a penny in this country. There's like 57 channels with nothing but game shows on in this country. You could have hired a game show producer and said, just do your game show thing, mate. Nothing special here, just your game show thing.
I am now imagining Bradley Walsh presenting the 100 draft as a kind of glorified Wheel of Fortune. Right, we got 2.
Come on down.
Yeah. Spin the wheel. You've won his and hers tracksuits.
You've won a Birmingham Phoenix shirt.
As you can tell, my formative years of Wheel of Fortune were in the 1990s when his and hers tracksuits were a thing. Maybe we should get his and hers tracksuits in. Right, sorry, I've diverted there.
It was a terrible TV spectacle.
I think this does partly relate to something that I was talking about last week, which was the fact that we don't do kind of those sort of Americanized spectacles very well in this country. We're still quite uncomfortable and unfamiliar with them. And a draft does feel like quite an American thing, doesn't it? And it didn't go very well. And I think for me, what's a bit strange about it is that I'm sure that we had the first 100 draft like 3 years ago when the competition was first starting, and I think we watched it because even though they didn't have a women's draft, they had some women's players on it to try and give the women a bit of a...
I think they were announcing some of the players for the women's teams.
So it was to try and give a little bit of kind of equal coverage, a bit of a nod to that. And I remember then lots of people saying this is rubbish, it doesn't work, and but also people saying, okay, well, we haven't done it before in cricket, we don't really know what we're doing, and just give us a chance. And they're years down the line now, and they haven't found a way to do it any better, and that's frustrating.
Yeah, and for me, it's the classic English disease of just the people at the top going, we could plan this, we could hire someone that's done a game show, or we could let's just wing it, guys.
Let's just wing it.
And it's because the producers themselves aren't the people. It's just like, let's just get Daggers to wing it, and it's like they dropped Daggers in it from a great height, and the poor bloke just left talking to his colleague on screen, trying to make something of it, but there was nothing there to make. So Daggers, if you're listening,
which you probably aren't,
to be fair, because you've got better things to do. But if you are, you did a great job.
Done.
But but the producers dropped you in it, and it was poor. And
so let's talk about the actual selections,
content,
because there were some very interesting ones, weren't there, Sid? Obviously, the big one that's got a lot of people talking is Kate Cross, moving from Lancashire or Manchester Originals, where she's played all of her career, all of her cricket across her whole career, has been picked up by Yorkshire. Sorry, I'm not meant to call them Yorkshire, but Yorkshire.
Yeah, it's. I mean, we've talked when the first 100 was done, and there wasn't a draft. One of the reasons we said that there wasn't a draft was that it kind of feels drafts are difficult, and sometimes they'll force players to do something they don't want to do.
Yeah.
You've got to imagine that Kate Cross was not best chuffed about this.
Well, we don't have to imagine, because I did the research for us. I've listened to the No Balls podcast, Sid.
With Kate Cross?
Yeah,
with Kate Cross. What does she have to say?
Well, first of all, there's an explanation for what actually happened, which is that she was absolutely 100% expecting to get picked up by Manchester Originals, but at the next salary band down. And Yorkshire picked her up at the top salary band, okay? So that meant that because the Originals had already got Laura Wolvart in their top salary band, they couldn't then pick her. They couldn't then say, no, we're going to right to match her.
So they couldn't use their right to match card because they'd already filled up their top salary band.
And those are the rules about, because it's to do with matching the salary band. So that meant that that she's got to go. She's got to go to Yorkshire. And she was very, she did kind of put a brave face on that, and she did say on the podcast that of course I'm going to give it my best, and I'm sure that it will be great, and it will be a great team, and it will be a really great experience. But she also did say that she feels quite strange about it, and that it just feels a bit odd because she had in her head that she was going to be going to Originals and that she was going to be captaining Originals. Apparently they promised her the captaincy again, which of course, why wouldn't you? And now she's going to kind of be going to a different team and be a little bit of a bit part player, perhaps more so. She's not going to be captain, you would think. And that just, and she did say that it was a bit weird, especially because I think that right now she's actually on tour with the Thunder Girls, who to all intents and purposes are the Manchester Originals. Let's make no bones about it. It's the same team mostly. And that it just felt very weird going down to breakfast the next day and being like, oh, hi, I'm not going to be playing
you're a Yorkie now.
Yeah, exactly. And because of that kind of, ancient historic rivalry between those two counties, it's very odd for her.
Yeah, I mean, there are literally wars in English history between Lancashire and Yorkshire, effectively.
There you go. So it's
the Wars of the Roses.
It's strange for her.
It was a few hundred years ago, but those sentiments actually, surprisingly, for those who aren't English, those sentiments do actually persist a bit. And there is some serious rivalry between Lancashire and Yorkshire.
So I think you're right that what we're seeing here is the fact that the draft does rob players of that autonomy that they previously had. So it's not all shining, happy and roses in terms of what the draft has actually done for the women's 100 and for women's cricket. It's not necessarily a kind of empowering process for the players. So that just feels slightly odd.
Well, it's literally a disempowering process because she's being forced to do something she didn't really want to do.
I guess you could say, well, she's getting, £7,500 more, but on the other hand, she's not going to be captain.
So she won't get the captain's bonus, so actually it's probably only £3,000 or £4,000 more.
And there is that thing about it being important to be comfortable in the environment you're playing in. Anyway, on the plus side, Welsh Fire are looking good. And that is kind of what the draft was meant to do, right? Because, it's okay if you're a Southern Brave man, Sid, like you are, you're fine. You were quite happy with the way things went for the first couple of years of the 100, right? But if you're a Welsh Fire fan, then you're actually probably quite happy because they've now got Dunkley, they've got Ishmael, they've picked up Freya Davies, 3 really strong
they've been able to, effectively the draft has allowed them to, go into the chocolate box, and they were first in the chocolate box, and they got the best chocolates. What are the best chocolates in the chocolate box?
Which are we talking? Celebrations? Are we talking what?
Well, I don't know. Which are the ones with like the Quality Street? What's your favourite Quality Street, Raf?
The Green Triangle.
Oh yeah, Green Triangle's a pretty
and I like the blue coconutty one as well, which often people don't. That often divides opinion. What's your favourite?
I like that Green Triangle as well. There's also a caramelly one, isn't there? What's the caramelly one?
The hazelnut and caramel, that one. Yeah, okay, that's good too, yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay.
We digress.
We've digressed quite a lot. This is what happens when you record on a Sunday evening rather than a Sunday morning. Anyway, okay. Did you have anything else to say about picks in the 100 draft, or are we moving on?
No, I mean it did equalise things out a bit.
Okay.
I think there were some other interesting choices. I think a couple of teams kind of panicked towards the end and were like, "Oh, we haven't got any fast bowlers. We need to, we need to just pick a fast bowler. I need a fast bowler. Give me a fast bowler."
Yeah.
I think actually that might be another. I mean, I don't have any inside info on this, but I think that might be another symptom of this kind of English disease of going, "Let's wing it." I think that there's some very different decisions taken in the WPL about who they were going to pick. And I think the WPL, the owners had forced the coaches and things to kind of hire people like CRICKETher, and they'd forced them to look at the stats. There were independent people that were kind of representatives of the owners of the teams that were part of this process. Whereas I suspect a little bit of what happened here was a couple of coaches went into it by themselves. They probably didn't prepare as much as they might have done.
Okay.
If I can just throw that out there.
Well,
and you can never prepare as much as you might have done, but I think that they could have been better prepared, and that would have prevented some of those kind of panic selections at the end that it does feel a little bit like a couple of teams have done. A little bit like there's no real strategy there. It was just like, oh my god, we haven't got a fast bowler. And they were actually fast. They might have done a better job by picking different players and then going, okay, we'll pick up some fast bowlers in the free agency phase, because people seem to forget the free agency phase
exactly.
existed. You can fill up the rest of your squad with that. That's another half. Basically, another half of your squad.
Kate and Alex were saying on Nobles that the minute the draft finished, the phones were going, and people were on the phone going, "Oh, can I have so-and-so's number? Oh, we think we're going to try and get hold of so-and-so," and all of that kind of thing. So that's really interesting as a phase.
Yep. Well, anyway, I think I think the teams are going to, even themselves out a lot bit through that phase.
Hopefully.
So, and I'm looking forward to a good tournament again in August.
Good. Okay.
Right, now
On
more
to
serious
more
matters.
serious matters.
Unfortunately.
Yes, I know. So this week, the ICC board meeting concluded, Sid. But the reason why you haven't really read about it in mainstream media is because, it concluded without them really telling anyone that it had concluded. So basically what happened was Alison Mitchell tweeted on Thursday saying that she'd followed up with the ICC about the official outcomes of the board meeting. What happens normally is that they have their board meeting, and then the day that it finishes, somebody writes up a little conclusion of all the main points that have been discussed and all the main decisions that have been reached, and it gets sent out as an ICC press release so everyone can see it. For some strange reason, they decided not to do that this time. Wonder why? Well, what Alison Mitchell was told was, quote, "There were no significant decisions of note." She then followed that up with another tweet, except these seem like quite significant decisions. 1, raise the budget of the Afghanistan Cricket Board. 2, provide technical assistance to the Afghanistan Cricket Board to help them build capacity. All, she adds, all when women players from Afghanistan who fled to Australia have had zero engagement from either the ICC's Afghanistan Working Group or from the Afghanistan Cricket Board. So basically what's happened here is that the ICC have met, and far from punishing Afghanistan for their lack of engagement with women cricketers or any attempt to develop or rebuild their women's cricket team since the Taliban takeover, they've actually rewarded them for doing this by giving them some more money. So apparently now, if you're a full member, it's not even that you are meant to be developing women's cricket, it's that if you don't bother to do that and actually do the exact opposite, then oh well, we'll give you a budget increase anyway, apparently. So you can kind of understand, actually, why they decided not to issue a press release to the media, because clearly they know that this is not going to play well with the public, and it's not going to play well as a story. So it's essentially an attempt to wriggle out of any scrutiny. And I guess it shows that they don't really think that this policy is publicly defendable.
Yeah, no, and that's the most depressing thing, really, that the ICC clearly know that that what they're doing isn't really something that they want to defend in public.
No.
So they've avoided that.
Yeah.
And let's be clear here that this is not just about cricket. This is about more than cricket, right? That women in Afghanistan are totally denied their right to education. They're kept under virtual house arrest. I mean, it's they're obviously not allowed to go out and play sport, but there are wider issues than this. And that situation is just deeply shocking. And these people that are running this country are not people that we should be breaking bread with.
No.
You know, we are not telling the Afghanistan government how to run their country. We're absolutely not saying that. You know, I mean, it's tragic. We feel a lot very strongly that that's not the way that it should be run. But what we're saying here is that if they're going to run the country like that, we should not be engaging with them at all. That there are limits to what we'll engage with.
Correct.
And in the past, you know, those limits have been flirted with. They were flirted with in the 30s by governments that continued sporting links with Nazi Germany. And look how embarrassed we all are now about, you know, English footballers going to Nazi Germany and giving the Nazi salute. Look how embarrassed we are now about, you know, players and cricket teams that broke the boycott during the South African apartheid era. You know, and look how important we now consider that boycott as part of helping to kind of
bring about the end
of apartheid.
Yeah.
We should not be engaging with, you know, people that are not giving women their basic human rights. And if an organisation is going to engage with that, as the ICC have made a decision, they're going to continue to engage with, you know, the Taliban-run Afghanistan.
Correct.
And on that basis, we feel that the ECB should no longer engage with the ICC.
Yeah.
We are calling on the ECB to withdraw from the ICC. Now that sounds like a huge step. It sounds like a giant step. It might sound to a lot of people like an overreaction. But if it does sound to you like an overreaction, I want to ask you, what would not be an overreaction? What would the Afghan government have to do for you to say, okay, that actually is too far?
Yeah.
Because if keeping women under house arrest, denying women of all ages access to education, let alone access to sport and, you know, cricket more narrowly, if that is not your red line, where is your red line?
Absolutely.
Because I don't answer that question because I don't want to know what it is, because your red line is disturbing.
I think
we should not be engaging with these people. This is our red line, and we are calling on the ECB to withdraw from the ICC until the ICC take a commitment to human rights seriously.
Yeah. We are also calling on Cricket Australia and any other cricket boards around the world who also support human rights and women's rights to also withdraw from the ICC. We don't know, we are not privy to the conversations that go on at ICC board level, so we don't know which cricket boards may have behind closed doors opposed this decision and actually be kind of, you know, saying, oh, actually we should be taking action against Afghanistan. But clearly, currently, those boards who might be objecting behind closed doors are outnumbered. But what we are calling on you to do, therefore, is to kind of put your money where your mouth is, and also to not just talk the talk about women's cricket, but actually walk the walk and say, okay, in that case, we're actually gonna withdraw from the ICC because fine, we're outnumbered, but we feel strongly enough, and this is an important enough issue, that we don't want to engage with this international body anymore. And I actually genuinely think that if the ECB and or Cricket Australia did that, then that would put significant pressure on the rest of the ICC. Enough pressure that it would force them back to the board table, to that board meeting, to rethink that decision. Because it is England, Australia and India who are the three countries who are bringing in a lot of the ICC's revenue.
Yeah,
so if
they're
two
the
of those countries,
powerhouses.
or even if one of those countries withdrew, then the remaining countries would be very concerned about that. So I think this could potentially be an effective campaign. And that's why we're calling for it. We're not doing this as a performative act. We're not doing this as a way to promote CRICKETher or Raf Nicholson or Sid Egan or Megan Maurice, who obviously I co-wrote this piece with for wisdom.com. It's about actually trying to think, okay, what can we do? Because we've been doing this, we've been talking about this for months. It's been like, nearly 2 years now that this situation has prevailed and the ICC have done nothing. So something needs to change.
It does.
Okay, and we would just urge anyone who's watching or listening to this to get behind the campaign, and we're using the hashtag Cricket is a Human Right. So if you can use that, on social media, if you have any contacts that you think could be influential here, then we're asking you to get in touch with them, point them in the direction of this campaign, tell them how you feel. If we can make enough noise about this, then it could potentially change things. And it's really important. This is probably the most important thing that we've ever talked about on the CRICKETher Weekly.
And it's deadly serious. We wouldn't be calling for this level of action if we didn't think that this was deadly serious. But we just can't continue to engage with an organisation that is prepared to engage with the regime in Afghanistan. It's just not acceptable. And if you're part of the ECB and you're watching this, you need to be having a long, hard look in the mirror and going, what are we part of if we continue to be part of this?
Absolutely. Right. Thank you everyone for watching, and please get behind the campaign. Cricket is a human right.